comes to politics. Yeah, I'm well past the tinfoil hat stage. I need a good helmet for the banging my head against the wall stage. The Kate Daly Show starts now.
The government faked the moon landing was basically, it was technically impossible to do it. And they simply had to come up with some sort of alternative that they felt the public would believe.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio.
Can you realize that you and I, that all of us, have actually begun the exploration of another world?
The United States Geological Survey decided to build a model of one part of the lunar surface in an area accessible to present research centers.
4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
All right. Welcome, Kate Daly Show. How are you today? Oh, you're going to like today's show. This is, I'm talking about, they aren't conspiracies. That phrase was coined by intelligence to make people look stupid. No, these are just things we've been lied to and about. And I can't wait to bring to your attention some things that I've never talked about on the show and some things I have, but also I'm going to add to it. So there you go. You're going to like today's show. All right. So I'm also going to divvy this up into clips so that you can share this with friends and family, because I know that when you're trying to relay information, it can get difficult because if you haven't done all the research and study, it's really hard to remember, right? Okay. Which, by the way, I am going to bring up dementia. So there you go. I'm going to bring up how they factored dementia into the American story. And believe me, it was a story. So, not that it's not happening, but they lied about it. So lies and damn lies for today's show. And on top of that, I'm going to open the phone lines. I'd like you to comment on things that sometimes we're afraid to say out loud, things that we feel like aren't true, and that I think people get afraid. I do. I think people get afraid to say it because it's so against the norm, and they're afraid of being laughed at, and they're afraid of not being respected for saying things. One time on the show, I said, people don't want to be loved as much as they want to be respected. Now, love is a part of respect, but it's kind of interesting that respect is kind of what people are after more. You want to see people respect the country, the flag, a veteran, all these things that you want respect. And so what happened was in the 60s, they decided to basically come out with the term conspiracy theorist so that you wouldn't be respected if you questioned anything, which is insane. It's the truth, though. So I'm going to talk about all kinds of lies, and I want you to chime in because I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. So that was, of course, the moon landing, and I've done shows on this. I've done so many shows on this because once I didn't want to believe it, actually. I did not want to believe it. And I was actually mad. I remember Investigator Dave when I first had him on the show, and this was like over a decade ago. I remember him saying something about the moon landing, and honestly, I was kind of PO'd about it. I thought, no, that's not a lie. That has to be true. And he just shook his head and walked out. And I thought, okay, all right. So I started looking into it, and once I looked into it, I couldn't unsee what I was seeing. I mean, you can kind of see it after you look into it and really do the research. Then you're like, wow, we could have never done that. There was no way. And that's why we're going around the moon. Did you ever think about the fact that they're making a very big deal about spending billions of dollars when we're heavily in debt, so that you won't care because it's for patriotism, and that they're going to go around the moon? Now, remember, NASA, on their own website, not only said that they lost most of the actual records that proved we went to the moon, not the stuff around it. They say we have plenty of that, just like the peripheral things, but the actual evidence that we went to the moon, they lost it. And I remember when I was hosting the Alex Jones show, I said, we have Dorothy's slippers in an encased box, but we just allowed everything from the moon landing to just disappear. And oh shucks, darn, yeah, that didn't happen. And anyway, so on their own website they said that we had been there, done that, so there was no reason to go back. Okay, there was just no reason for it because we'd done it. Okay, now. Why do you think we went around the moon now? That's the story now. We went around the moon. If we've been there, done that, why would going around the moon be so vital and spend billions of dollars going around the moon? Doesn't make any sense, does it? So nothing with NASA ever makes sense. We need to come up with a good acronym for NASA, by the way. I mean, I've seen some, but we need to come up with something even better. So I'm going to kind of scoot over the moon landing just because there are so many people whose emotions are tied into history with that. And it's almost as if the moon landing describes their childhood, and that if you say anything about the moon landing not being true, their whole entire childhood was a lie. Can you imagine being so emotional about something that the government said they did that's tied into your own childhood? And that you're so emotional you can't look at facts? The fact that we had enough fuel to go up 239,000 miles and back. The fact that there wasn't even a liftoff in space. The fact that, I could just go on and on. Who took the photos? Who had the camera sitting there as they took off, showing up in prime time on a Sunday. I mean, just at the perfect time so everyone could see it. I mean, there's just so many things about it, right? But what I'm talking about is the emotion tied to it. And you'll find a lot of people over the age of 50 that are just like, la, 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 can't hear a thing because their emotions are tied in to this being part of their childhood. Now, forget NASA. I mean, as far as space, what if we would have done that in the late 60s to detract from the Vietnam War? What if we would have done that about going down to the ocean floor? And I've said this before on the show. Then everybody would have like little sea creatures on their walls and sea creature hats. And we tend to kind of get into the narratives of government. So I just, and then they kind of work their way into our childhood, and then poof, they're part of an emotion that we feel. So if you can take yourself out of the emotion, not let government things define your childhood, and then really take a good stab at it and look at it from a practical sense point of view, from the technology that we had in the 60s, I think you're going to come to the same conclusion, and then you can't unsee it. Okay. Now I'm going to shift to a different one. And then I have some new ones too. So this is a very, very big lie. Now this lie, here is a Chinese woman, and she is talking about the fact that the population of China is not what they say. Now, China is about the same size as the USA. Okay. I have done shows that the world population is a lie. All right. I've done shows on this, and people were so skeptical of my take on this. And it was kind of funny because doing the research, I was just blown away, and I can't unsee it. And the reason that led me into examining the world population numbers were because the people that mentioned it the most were Bill Gates, all your famous eugenics stars. Okay. These were the people that were talking about it the most. And so I thought, why do they always reference population? Why do they always talk about it? Why does it start with population? And then of course we have too many people. Abortion is good. All these narratives coming out of government, and that climate change, too many people are causing climate change. Everything that these people are about was the start of that was overpopulation. Okay. So I'm going to play for you a Chinese woman, and this is a clip that's going viral, but I'm going to tell you that there is a misdirection in this clip, and I'm going to show you this. I'm going to have you listen to this clip, but I want you to look at the lie. Okay. So they're trying to take something that actually is true. There is not 1.4 or 1.6, depending on who you talk to, billion people in China. But she has a completely different reason for it. So here is the clip. Here we go. Listen.
So you think that they have a very similar population to the United States and China?
Yes.
There's 1 billion people missing. And this goes back to what
Missing.
we were saying in the beginning or earlier in the podcast with all of the fake IDs and all of this stuff being found out. Yeah, there's possibly 1 billion people missing. It's not a demographic question, Danny. It's a mathematical question. Let me ask you. It takes a couple to have 2 children to replace themselves, right? Think about it. Yes. If every couple produces 2 children, the population stinks level. Right. So, do you know how many children does every woman needs to have in her lifetime in order to triple its population in 50 years? To triple its population in 50 years, or have what? Let me guess. Terrible math. I'll give you the answer. Okay. I asked AI. It's a crazy mathematical. If a country needs to triple or grow its population by 2.5 times, let's just say 2.5 times, okay, over a span of 50 years. 5 kids? Each woman, you're right, each woman needs to give birth on average between 4.5 to 5.5 children. Wow. Okay. Now, China grew its population officially from 1950, that's when the CCP took over to control. Okay, China's population in 1950 was about 500 million. In the year 2000, 50 years later, China's population was about 1.27 billion. Okay, so it grew 2.5 times, right? From 500 million to 1.27 billion. That's 2.5 times over 50 years. Chinese women did not have, on average, have 5 children because of the one-child policy. Yes. Because of the Great Famine. Because of the Great Famine, tens of millions of people died. Because of Cultural Revolution. So China, from one political movement to another, and then to almost 4 decades of single-child policy, there's no way Chinese women had 5.
Yeah, there's no way they had 5 children apiece. She's a Chinese woman, and she's questioning it. Now, I feel like there is a misdirection lie in that because they aren't missing. They just never were. Okay? They aren't missing. There's not 1 billion people missing. So what they're trying to do is to tell you that 1 million people in China are missing and that they have IDs and that they're here. Okay, so there's always going to be truth told, but misdirection on top of it. So in the population lie, if you will, okay, this is what happened. I'm going to tell you what happened. So this is on video because I did this show on audio only when I was on the radio before I was censored. I was syndicated nationally and I was completely censored. So I did this show, but I want to say this real quick for those of you who don't remember maybe what I said 2 years ago. The American China Development Company, okay, founded in 1895. And this was founded by J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie. Also, the Rockefellers were thrown into this batch too. They sought to provide the American capital and management to generate this industrialization of China. And so they started building the Hankow Canton Railroad. And then, of course, it linked central and southern China. And there was a lot of chatter about, Standard Oil being part of the China market and taking advantage of the China market. Okay. So at the same time, they conducted a study. They wanted a study of the Chinese population. Up to this point, they had not done one. Now, they have about the same landmass as we do here in America, okay? So you're kind of looking about the same, give or take, okay? So they wanted to get the numbers. And we were at about, I think we were at about 72 million back at this time. And we were a fast-growing country. We had a lot of kids, okay? And the Chinese were coming over here to build the railroad. They were coming over here because of poverty. So they weren't in a great place. But when they came out with this, okay, it was rounded to about 255 million people that they said lived in China. So we only had 72 million. And they said in the late 1800s, they had 255 million, even though they were very poor, needed our help. We were funding them. We were sending money to them. For the next 30 years, we would be funding a lot of their stuff over there. Okay. Health wise, food wise. I mean, they weren't in a great state. But they said in a matter of 30 years later, okay, we're looking at the end of the 1920s. They said in a matter of just 30 years, they went from 255 million people to 421 million people. Okay, look around. How many people get born? Okay, USA has only achieved what, 335 million, give or take? They said back then, okay, in a 30-year span, they went to 421 million. Well, people did not believe this. There were people that were actually asking about this. And back in the late 1800s, they were writing in op-ed pieces into the newspapers. And they were saying, even Mr. George F. Seward, okay, he said the China population states that for imaginative reasons, this was an op-ed written into the paper, imaginative reasons for placing the population higher than 200 million at the time in the late 1800s. The question was raised in 1881 at the International Review in January, stating that China's population could not be more than 80 million, and that the data concerning the population is so untrustworthy, it's reduced to a little bit more than guesswork. Okay, this was in the Alton Daily Telegraph in 1882 because they were spinning this lie. So then what they started to say was, in over 4 decades, then they would basically have an increase of 72% increase. And so it was amazing, right? And people were really, really questioning this. And so then it went into, over the years through Mao, when major poverty hit, when major tyranny hit, and then you had the one-child rule in China. And that's what that girl was talking about. She goes, if you factor in Mao and you factor in all those things, which the United States didn't have, okay? So we went from 72 million to now 335 million. They went from, they said 255 million to 1.6 billion. And so there's so many people questioning that, and the Chinese are questioning this. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention because there's no way, if you look at the population, that the Chinese could have kept having five children apiece to be able to double and triple their population and quadruple their population like they did. All right. And so there were all kinds of articles that were taking this apart and saying that there's no way. And what they did was, in the 1950s, they used to say from the late 1800s to the 1950s that it was speculation. Okay, that the numbers were speculative, okay, because they told you, oh, we couldn't possibly know the real numbers, but we're just rounding it, just rounding it. And then from the 1950s on, they said it was fact. They said it was fact. It was a fact that China had all of these people, okay? So it could not have happened. It just could not have happened. And so 24 million in Shanghai, right? China's biggest populated city with 24 million. How in the world would you get to 1.6 billion? So the people, because we think of it like China, well, China has all these people. Well, yeah, in the cities, kind of like we do, stacked, right, in apartments. But if you really look at the landmass, you're not going to find that. So I bring this to your attention because when they keep saying 8 billion people, the thought is that actually you're looking at probably 3 to 4 billion people. But they have to keep the lie going, because if they don't, then what happens is they can't exercise the thought of eugenics, right? So when we hit that late 1800s, on the heels of China's over-exaggerated numbers and India's over-exaggerated numbers of population, they said that was the catalyst, the reason that they had to bring in chemical fertilizer. that the natural fertilizers were out in favor of industrialized food and industrialized measures, which included the industrial pesticides, the industrial fertilizers. So I say this because a lot of people don't make these connections. And on this show, we make those connections. So there you go. So, so we do have a big problem in the overestimation of population. And when they rolled out abortion, when they rolled out climate change, when they rolled out, well, basically, if you look at all of the concepts behind eugenics, it was always based on an overpopulation. And that's why they mention it. And now you can go back and you can review the clips. Whenever Bill Gates talks, whenever any of them talk, they always mention it. And it usually starts their, honestly starts their conversations. So, so I bring this up because I have brought this up before. I've done a couple of shows about it. And at first, man, you should have seen the reaction. People were like, there's no way. There's no way. They know we have 8 billion people. I'm like, they don't. In fact, it started off with a lie over 100 years ago, and the lie just kept compounding and then turned into a fact. So that's not true. It's kind of like the lie of the Spanish flu that I brought up on the show. Spanish flu was lied about. I looked in the papers in 1918 and 1919 and 1920. And then I looked at the papers in 1940, and they just kept doubling the number. And then so it went from millions to 10 million in 1940 died from it to 1975. President Ford said that 25 million people died from it. Then it got to Obama, and he said that 40 million people died from it. And now it's 40 to 50 million people died from the Spanish flu. And the reason they give now, and they turned it into a fact, is because they say that people didn't know how to count back then. I kid you not. If you look back in the newspapers, you'll see the accounting. They did it by person. It was very right on. There was no assumption. There was no anything. And when I looked in the newspapers in 1918 and 19 in my records, because I have access to newspapers clear back then, and it was like 10 in this city, 20 in this city. I mean, it wasn't as big as you think. Actually, my great aunt actually died of this, but who knows what they were really dying from. So they said that they didn't understand math, and this is exactly why you don't know the numbers, and so they turned it into a massive lie. Now, every time there's a disease, what do? They go, oh, we can't have the 1918 flu again. Yeah, no kidding. So a big lie, but as long as we can see through it. I used to do a speaking engagement just on that topic alone because people just did not understand how much they could possibly lie about this. 50 to 60 million people, they say, died. And it's almost funny at this point because the number grew so substantially from the truth. And back then, I'm going to guess that probably about 200,000 people died total here in the United States. So they'd had to turn it into a big lie because this is when they started talking about contagion and virus. This is about the point when they started saying virus was killing us and virus was contagious. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you another interesting lie. You want another interesting lie? Okay, here we go. So this is another fascinating one, and this goes back to 1908. And I actually did a presentation on this, and I swear to you, I got people acting like I had 3 horns on my head. Like, how dare you say this about something so scientifically established? And I was like, it's not. It's not scientifically established. Listen to this clip. This involves Simon Flexner and virus because the 1918 flu was masks, it was quarantine, it was contagion. And this is where they sold the lie, and this is why they still lie about the 1918 flu. Here you go.
1908, famous paper. I never heard about this in medical school. They took a child who died of paralysis. Mm-hmm. Right? They didn't know why. This child died of paralysis. The part of their spine called the anterior horn cells looked diseased when they did an autopsy. So they took some of that. They said the virus must be in there. They ground it up, put it through a filter to get the big stuff out, put that in a syringe, injected into the brain of 2 monkeys. 1 monkey died and 1 got paralyzed. And they said, see, we've proven that polio is a virus. And I read that in 2020 and I thought, you have got to be kidding me. Because first of all, they didn't see a virus in there. That's not the only thing that was in there. And they didn't inject normal brain into a monkey. Maybe monkeys don't like having dead spine tissue injected into their brain. But that was the proof, right?
Yeah.
So then they do that for about 50 years, probably 100,000 monkeys. That's, by the way, called the isolation of the virus, which is weird use of the word isolation. Then in 53, somebody says, I'm going to inject healthy spine into a monkey's brain. And you know what happened? The monkey died and the other one got paralyzed. And he said, well, that way is disproven. And so we have to find a new way to isolate the virus.
Yep. So what they did was Simon Flexner via the Rockefellers actually said, and this is true, they actually took diseased monkey brains. They injected it to somebody. They said, this isn't bacteria. No, this is a virus. But it's invisible. It's invisible. And it's a virus. We were going to call it virus. And so this was clear back in like 1905. And even though they called it invisible, they said that you can't really see it, but just don't look at the bacteria we had to inject. Just know that this is something new. Okay. So then when 1918 hit and the doctors were wearing masks, okay, and they were trying to sell the lie of contagion for virus that you couldn't see, what was fascinating about this was that they had doctors writing into the papers and they were writing into the op-ed sections and they were saying, you can't, this isn't contagion. Like, what are you talking about? We don't need to wear masks. The only people that are going to get sick from masks are the people wearing them. Like, this is ridiculous, you know? People, when I saw the op-eds, it was really funny because the nurses and doctors were like really arguing about this. But right after this is about the time that the country doctor was out, right? 1930s. And then, of course, they introduced the Johns Hopkins medical training, which didn't include health. It was all about pharma. And they weren't trained in any minerals or vitamins or anything. They also started the Institute for Virology. And so they made virus into a substantiated claim of science. But the science behind it was that it was invisible and it wasn't a real thing. It was just named. Yeah. I actually did a presentation on this, and I swear to you, like, mouths were on the floor and people looked at me like, you're insane. And I'm like, hey, I can't make up what they did in the early 1900s to substantiate what virus was. If you believe that they came up with something that's invisible and named it and that it's real, that's on you. Okay, so it really makes you question virus, doesn't it? All right, so on the heels of that lie, I want to bring you yet another one. Okay, so see, I have to smile, otherwise I'll cry because the lies are so big. The lies are so big, people can't understand. They're not conspiracies, they're just actual lies. So let me bring to the stage this guy. You know who this guy is? Jean-Martin, what the hell is his name? I always forget it. Jean-Martin Charcot, okay? He's French. And this guy right here, this is very interesting. Now, I want to tell you about this guy because I brought this up a week ago. I think it was a week ago. I did a show about the origin of disease. And I want to tell you about this guy. This guy is a piece of work. This guy, oh my gosh, you guys. He worked on naming. This is what he did for a living. He named diseases that he said were new. But there's a lot of lies that are involved in the naming of those diseases. So Number one, he is the one that talked about dementia. Okay. And what's interesting about him was that he went into this insane asylum and he looked at 200 people that were crazy. And he said he observed them. And he said that basically, this is the guy that named ALS. This is the guy that named Parkinson's. Okay. So Parkinson's was later named after somebody, but this is the guy that identified it. Now, this guy was put in charge of a whole new department, and this whole new department was dedicated to neurological degenerative diseases. So what this guy did was they call him the father of French neurology and the world's pioneers of neurology. It's a load of crap. Anyway, what he did was he went into this insane asylum, and those diseases were not done by fact. So those diseases were not brought to us because they did a bunch of studies. The diseases were brought to us because he observed some crazy people and said, I think they have these symptoms, and said, this is a new disease. I kid you not. It's so crazy. So he yeah, and this guy wasn't a great guy, by the way. I don't know if you can tell from his countenance, but he's not a great guy. But what he did was they were kind of looking at history. If you look at history and you really kind of look into hysteria, he was studying women that had hysteria. Okay. That were basically going into these clinics. And basically what he did was he said they had anxiety, they had irritability, they had sexual behavior changes, they were calling them unwomanly. And they say this in history, the cause of hysteria was not settled, but medical thought evolved over the century. Now, evolved means that you make it up as you go. That's what science means when you say it's evolving. So they actually said it was more of a nervous disease. And then he said, no, it's way bigger than that, even though he didn't know that, but that it's way bigger than that. So basically, if you're looking at this high arsenic exposure, which was happening in the 1800s. Melissa talked about yesterday, talked about Mary Todd, Lincoln's wife, and that she had pins and needles in fingers and toes, that feeling of pins and needles. That actually is arsenic poisoning. And arsenic was used in many, many things in the 1800s. It can cause personality changes. It can cause all kinds of things to happen to you. And so people who had confusion, seizures, all kinds of like problems walking, all kinds of different things. There was a lot of talk and chatter about maybe possibly what arsenic could do. And so I find it kind of compelling that that Jean Martin, whatever the hell his name is, Charcot or whatever, just kind of penned his name on a disease that people didn't really have. It wasn't a disease per se, but possible poisoning. So you can take with that what you want, but I did find it very interesting that he went into basically like kind of commandeering a new name for a new set of things, like the ataxias. So there's an ataxia, which is kind of like a slow ALS that I mentioned a week ago, I think, that they did a study on. This is kind of how the study, if they did a study, this is how the study went. You study 9 people that live in a little village that are related, okay? And each of the 9 people in this close 3-generational family have certain symptoms. Each one is different. Okay. One person has a heart problem. One person has a walking problem. One person has scoliosis. But they come in and they say, well, they have this new disease. Because if you take all those symptoms and put them together, now we have formed a new disease. That's how they did it. They didn't do it by study. They didn't do what you think they did. Okay. So this is in the 1800s, late 1800s, and all these diseases seem to pop up around the same time, which is very suspicious. So all of a sudden, you had a lot more toxins being used. All of a sudden, you had, arsenic. We had all kinds of stuff being used, and then we had all the chemical fertilizers and pesticides come out, which would cause a lot of these symptoms: weakness in extremities. I mean, all these types of things, right? Motor neuron diseases. I mean, muscle weakness, muscle wasting, all of these things. And what you do is you say these 9 people had this particular disease, this new disease that we've just named. And usually they're naming it after themselves, but we just named a disease. But if you look under the hood, so what they say now is that it's a genetic thing. So, and also on that ataxia, it was that it was European descent. Well, European descent just because they found it in Germany? Only 9 people? It wasn't everywhere. Okay. So what they did was they said, oh, it is genetic and it is of this certain descent, which is basically all of us, because pretty much most of us came from there. So therefore, we have penned a new disease. It's all pretend. I mean, they at the time, this wasn't prevalent. You had, I think, certain poisonings happening that were understandably coming out in symptoms, but they started naming these diseases. And then when you get to the 1900s, so years later, right, all of a sudden, after the 50s, you had the VAX program and you had DDT and then glyphosate as the pesticides. Okay. So you have these diseases, and then all of a sudden doctors start reporting the numbers. But if you look back in history, the lie is that it was underreported. But I contend that if you have a symptom that puts you in a wheelchair or causes muscle extremity, like just weakness, or you're going to see a doctor. Okay. You're going to report that. So it wasn't underreported. It just wasn't as big of a thing. So the more poisoning they did, then it started really showing up in the 70s. So that's why I say there's so much more to the story behind diseases that we don't look at. When people realize that dementia was basically off of watching 200 people in an insane asylum, not looking at all their records, not just observing them and saying that we have dementia. Well, look around, guys. You're seeing dementia everywhere. Do you know anyone that's older that doesn't have some dementia? Is that just an overload of toxins and parasites? Okay. So what are we really looking at, right? The poisoning of America. That's what we're really looking at. So I always find it really, really compelling when I go back into history and I'm looking at all of these things like copper. Okay. Now, there is a product that I take called Recuperate Copper. Okay. There's 2 products that Formula IQ sells, and formulaiq.com. And you can use my name, Kate. But the reason that I started talking about copper and the reason that I tell you about that product is because it's so vital. So basically, what happened was we used to drink from copper pipes. We used to drink from copper goblets. Copper was everywhere. And then when it got to about the 1930s, they started lying about copper. The new medical school, the Johns Hopkins Medical School, started basically not telling you about health and then telling you that it was that copper was scary, that you should fear copper, that copper isn't a thing, and that you can be toxic. Okay, toxic levels of copper. And so it's funny now that people fear it. It's kind of like how they feared tomatoes in the 1600s and thought that they were full of poison. Same exact thing. If people get the idea enough, they will believe it. So nowadays, copper is never questioned. But we knew copper was very, very important to the story because it is the master mineral, right? Well, when you start to look at older people like this woman here, okay? I know I swear everyone looks really depressed at this period of time. They almost look like, seriously, kill me now because my life sucks. It's hard not to find a picture that looks like this right here. So they just look like the most saddest people on earth. Anyway, I'm sure they weren't, but this is what you get. So go look at the photos of these older people, okay? You're going to probably find a lot of people that made it over the age of 50 that do not have gray hair. Do you see that? Okay. Go look at pictures. Just go look at them. You will see gray, but it's not prevalent. So a lot of even the older women, nothing, no gray. Do you see that? So the thought behind that is, and if you look it up and you look up copper and gray hair, you will notice that they talk a lot about melatonin and how copper feeds melatonin and how it can be a sign of not having enough copper. Okay. So 1930s, we started losing copper in our food supply. I think it was by design. And then they started spraying the pesticides. The DDT and the glyphosate steal your copper. Copper is the most important mineral. It is the orchestra leader over the other minerals. It tells the cell what to do with iron. So energy production, all of those things are controlled by copper. And so a lot of people go anemic. And what they do is they go into the doctor. And what does the doctor prescribe? The doctor prescribes iron. Well, iron supplements are not that great for you. Okay. Your body needs to produce its iron, right? And the cells need to regulate the iron in your system. Well, if you don't have copper, which tells all the minerals what to do, that's at the foundation. It's at the root of your health. And I think a lot of diseases stem back to that loss of copper, because once they started removing copper, not training the doctors in copper, having us fear copper, all of a sudden you saw all of the issues behind not having enough copper, all the symptoms showing up. After the 1950s, many diseases where the loss of copper is actually almost verbatim some of these diseases. Parkinson's, ALS, like you have zero copper. It's kind of amazing that it's the same list of symptoms when you have severe deficiencies. So I find that compelling because looking into it, I never realized, to tell you the truth, I never realized how lied to we were about the origins of those diseases when they weren't prevalent at all. It was pretend. It was like, not pretend. I shouldn't say that. That gives you a different connotation. It should be more like they were just sort of assumed and made up. Like, we're going to take this set of symptoms that's coming from toxic poisoning because we know we're going to have more toxic poisoning. So we need to have some sort of way to describe what's happening to you so that you think you have a genetic disease, that you're not being poisoned. I honestly don't think they wanted people to connect the dots to our food supply, the industrialization of our food supply, to the pesticides, the chemicals, all of those things. The DDT poisoning, the outcome of that was your polio symptoms. And they named it polio. Okay? It was a poisoning. In 1952, I've said this many times on the show, but it's worth saying again. In 1952, Congress started questioning it. I read some of the congressional records. They started questioning DDT and was it causing this polio spike? And they stopped spraying it as much and it lessened. And then in 55, 3 years later, they came out with the famous polio dose. And then it started giving people more of these symptoms. And that is how they substantiated polio as polio, instead of, hey, we have a DDT poisoning going on. So glyphosate, DDT, all of those things steal your copper. Then we don't have that level of copper in our system to regulate things. And all of a sudden we started getting chronic fatigue and Epstein's, and you have more ALS. We didn't have ALS, really. You really couldn't find it before the 1950s. It was hardly a trace of anyone with ALS. Then they started saying that they were reporting it. So they say, oh, it's underreported. So that's a lie. So anyway, so we start getting ALS, we start getting dementia, we start getting Alzheimer's, we start getting ataxias. We start getting all of these diseases. And these guys were very, very, very busy penning their name to a set of symptoms that were just emerging at the time. Now, think about that for a second. Why would you take the time and put money into that? See, doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. So that one is a very interesting one too, because we don't look under the hood. We don't go, well, what was the study? How did they name said thing? How did they name Alzheimer's? Alzheimer's actually came off of one person. It was one person. It was taking one person's brain and saying that we have a new disease and it's Alzheimer's. Very interesting, because I actually do think that many things that we're incurring right now are coming from a series of poisonings and parasites. Parasites can actually take your copper as well. Did you know that? Parasites actually can steal your minerals. Yeah. So what they were, going back to arsenic for just a moment, 19th century, they were using arsenic in everything: farming, homes, medicine, and fashion, everything. But they never wanted to associate that with illness. So they started penning these disease names. Okay. And then I think they upped the ante. I think they actually started really going crazy on all of these poisons. And then still to this day, they can go, well, it was substantiated in the 1800s, so therefore it must be genetic and it must be, your descent and all these things. But that's actually not true. So that's my take anyway, after doing all of this research. So there's that. And virus, dementia, I'm going through my list of things. If you saw me on a video in 2021 that went viral, you're going to remember that my husband got out of the hospital, that he had what they called COVID. And I said, yeah, COVID's BS, it's pneumonia. And they wanted to do remdesivir and they wanted to do the ventilator on him. And they kept trying to talk him into that. And his D-dimer numbers, his numbers were off the charts. They were very, very bad. And we opted to do high dose vitamin C. Between 10 and 25,000 units back in the 1930s and 40s, they had already established that high dose vitamin C could kill pneumonia within 24 to 48 hours. So we did high levels of vitamin C liquid. We did zinc. We did took them off the steroid that they wanted to do, because they started it. We made them take it off because it was causing diabetes symptoms, making diabetes go through the roof, and put him on budesonide. And day 3, he was out of the ICU. And on day 5, he was golfing. And he should have been dead. So when you rely on things that actually work. And my reliance was on the frontline doctors. My reliance was on my study of disease. I was willing to bet my husband's life that we were being lied to about COVID, because I knew that in the hospitals, they saw a whole lot of death, but they were pretending as if they were doing all that they could. And I didn't want him to die, and I wanted to make sure and get him out and in one piece and healthy. And so we went back to the roots of health and made sure that we were giving his body what he needed. And within about 30 hours, he was sitting up and eating Chinese food and doing great. And the guy on the right of us died, and the guy on the left of us died in the ICU. So if you saw that video, it went viral because I was trying to help people. What I find kind of compelling about the whole COVID thing was that anyone that did that high dose vitamins and kind of went with the frontline doctor's protocol, I haven't heard anyone that died from that. I got hundreds and hundreds of letters daily. It was amazing, about people that were looking into the frontline doctors, what to do rather than taking the doctor's advice. Now, plenty of people died from what the doctors said to do, but people weren't dying from doing the thing that the frontline doctors said to do, the doctors that actually knew about health. Don't you find that compelling? So the proof is right in front of our faces. It's just, are you going to look at it or not? You can look at it or not, right? So people were messaging me all over the country, getting their loved ones out of the hospital in one piece. That's important. That's important to know that after rejecting everything that the government and the hospital said to do, my loved one was thriving. Okay. It was a scary time, but my loved one was thriving. Why? Because we went back to the roots of health, and we didn't look at pharma. We didn't say pharma's the answer, government's the answer, and the doctors run by the government are the answer. And so I went against all of their advice, and they told me I was going to kill him by doing that. You're going to kill him if you don't put him on remdesivir and a ventilator. You're going to kill him. But what's ironic about that is that when he lived and he's thriving and he's healthy and he's out of the ICU in 3 unheard of days, they called it an anomaly. That's how idiotic they are. They called it an anomaly. So I guess we have a lot of people that followed the frontline doctor's advice, and I guess they're just anomalies, all of them? That's amazing. So what I'm saying is, look, when it comes right down to it and your loved one's health is on the line, please listen to your gut and pray about it. And God really came in for me on that one, because I knew what to do. And I relied on the people that knew what to do. And I completely rejected the asinine doctors that were telling me to do the exact opposite, and the nurses that acted like bullies. I was basically like, you're not going to kill my husband. Sorry. So not today. And we got him out of there. And when he was golfing on day 5, a lot of the nurses and doctors really kind of looked a second look and went, what? And then I've told you this before. I've told you this many times because I really want to make this point, because when my husband's life's on the line, this is a good point to make. Okay. But what was fascinating and what really took my breath away, okay, was when people heard that podcast and they started going in to the doctor to request how my husband survived, okay, and got out of the hospital with, and that was just high dose vitamin C and zinc and D, okay. When that happened, people started going in and requesting those things. And the hospital that I know of, I'm not going to say their name because they've really tried to go after me, but the hospital then decided that they were going to make it, they wrote all the doctors and said, you cannot prescribe high dose vitamins at all for anyone, even if they ask. When that happened, that was mind-blowing to me, because I can understand if people are brainwashed. I can understand the medical cabal is brainwashed into pharma. I can understand that they think they're doing a great job or they think they've nailed it. I can understand mistakes. I can't understand intention. When it becomes intention, when the medical cabal has the intention of depriving people of their choices to make themselves healthy, now we have a criminal problem. Okay. And what's amazing to me further is that even after watching my husband and having his life on the line, that they could not come to grips with the fact that what they were doing for people was basically killing them. They couldn't come to grips with that. So they made me the enemy. They made vitamins the enemy. They made minerals the enemy. I know, it's amazing. It's like a psychosis. Okay. So in the future, when we have more, because Pfizer's not done and the government's not done controlling your health, learn as much as you can about health right now. Have as many old books as you can on hand. Know about health. Know how they lied about diseases. Know what possibly caused those diseases. Look at symptoms. Look at the things as why would these women be hysterical or feel like they had pins in their fingers or all of these things? Could it be a poisoning of arsenic? I mean, ask these questions. Ask better questions. Go back to the original studies. Look at the origins of disease. Look at the origin of virus. You're going to learn so much about our health. Virus is imaginary. Virus is imaginary. And doctors at the time in the early 1900s were saying, wait a minute, how can you name something that's imaginary? How do you get people to believe it? Easy. You just say it's a product of science. And then you have science owned by people like the Rockefellers. And whatever they say is fact. So you can spin it out really well, actually. It's not too hard. We're very gullible. We're very gullible people. You know, when I looked at I brought up the flu numbers, the Spanish flu, and they lied about it. So 1918, maybe 200,000 people. In fact, it was like on page 10. Like it wasn't even front page news for a lot of it. We kind of think it hit front page news every day, like the death toll, like what we have now, you know. That's not it at all. Go look back at the newspapers. It wasn't like that at all. It was like page 10. Okay. It wasn't a world crisis that was going on at the time. And this is right about the time that they were starting to mess with vaccines, and they were actually using those on our soldiers. Yeah. So you had breakouts of things at the army camps at the time. Anyway, when I looked in the newspaper and saw that in 1940 they changed the number and they put it at 10 million, and they said approximately. And then in 1975, when Ford said, you know, it was 25 million, not one journalist questioned that. Not one journalist looked at that. Not one person said, hey, wait a minute. How did you go from 10 million to 25 million people? And then when Obama had it changed during his presidency to 40 million, and the excuse was because they can't count. They couldn't count back then. You know, it kind of gives you a whole new view of medicine, doesn't it? And you can't rely on your newspapers and your journalists to tell you the truth about it. So you have to do it. It's on us. It's our responsibility. In fact, during COVID, this is very, very interesting. The newspapers all told you to get the shots, right? They gave you all the stuff that the government wanted to give you. They were the mouthpiece of the government. They told you to get the shots. They told you remdesivir was working, even though it was killing people. They told you the ventilators were perfect and amazing, and it was the only option we had. It was it. That was it. It was the only option. And then there were people in the hospital saying they were getting talked into a ventilator. Then you found out that there was money behind it, and the hospitals received X amount of dollars for COVID patients on ventilators. And then you started to put two and two together, right? So during that time, the newspapers spilled out every single lie to you about this that was fathomable. Okay. Just every single lie. And we were on the radio getting skewered because we were telling people, don't listen, don't listen, don't listen. They're lying to you. Every single day, they're lying to you. From day one, we were like, they're lying to you about this COVID thing. So when this happens again, what are you going to do? What's your game plan? My advice to you, because the medical cabal is so owned now, and as you saw in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, the hospitals are completely commandeered, okay? And this is why people lost their rights. Family members lost their rights to see their loved ones. Our nursing homes are completely commandeered by the government. This is why you weren't able to visit your loved one as they were dying in a nursing home. So knowing that now, and knowing that the same government is in, and the same government isn't changing a thing about what happened, okay? They're not changing any laws. They're not doing anything about it. Okay. Nobody's changed a thing since those lockdowns, loss of liberty, and then also the commandeering of our medical. Okay. So the newspapers never said they were sorry for reporting all that BS. They never said they were sorry for reporting the lies about the hospitals being filled, and they weren't. They never reported to you that, hey, we probably made some mistakes about that ventilator and remdesivir. And by the way, they changed the name to Valkyrie. But they never ever retracted, said they were sorry or anything. And no one, to my knowledge, has ever written the newspaper and said, gee, thank you for saving my life. But I guarantee you that the frontline doctors got hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of letters saying, thank you for saving our lives. So now you know who you can rely on for truth. Okay. And my advice to you is set up a game plan right now that your loved one, if they are stuck in a hospital for the next COVID that comes, for the next thing that they want to do, and they're not listening to you, and they actually exclude you from coming into the hospital, which they tried to do to me. Only one nurse stuck up for me and said, you can't do that. It's not ethical. But they tried to remove me from being my husband's, person that talks for them in the hospital. They tried to do that on the first day based on what I do for a living. So my recommendation to you, and remember this because this is important, get your loved one out on hospice, because on hospice, you have control over what happens. Okay? I was telling people to do that because I said, if they can't listen to you and you are not permitted in that hospital and they are doing everything that they want to get away with, okay, get them out on hospice. Have a plan, because people didn't have a plan. They didn't know what to do. And they were just going crazy. They were messaging us and texting us, trying to figure out what to do for their loved one because they thought, the hospital's killing my loved one right now. And my advice to them was get them out on hospice because you have control over what happens. You can then have those high dose vitamins administered. You can do things that under the hospital roof you can't do, and resort to more health measures. But I'm telling you, I know all of you guys were affected during the COVID years. You knew somebody that died in the hospital, and the doctors and nurses were still called heroes, and everyone marched around as if they were saving the day, even though people in their care were dying. But we called them heroes. We made big bulletin boards and big posters out of it. And we did commercials where doctors were hailed as the heroes, and they just were trying. They were trying. Were they? Because the doctors I ran into didn't study anything. They did what they were told, and they knew it. They even admitted it. Oh, we take orders. That's what we do. We take orders. This is what the hospital says to do. This is all we can do. And if most of the people are dying on it, I guess that's all we can do. And my objection to that was, you mean you can't find a doctor that's going, hey, what we're doing isn't working. Maybe we should try something else. Maybe we should do some research and look into this, because the doctors are treated like gods. So our biggest problem is we don't understand health. This is why they could lie to us about copper and have us fear it. Take copper. There's a lot of symptoms that derive from copper. I know somebody that doubled their platelets in a matter of a week because of taking copper. When my daughter was pregnant, she was told to take an iron supplement. Well, the babies take that copper from the body, okay? They take all those minerals from that mom. And she was told to take an iron supplement. And she said, no, I'm taking copper. Oh, the doctor. Oh, fear. Oh, fear. And a month later, it acts pretty quick. A month later, went in and her iron levels were perfect. And the doctor was shocked. This happened with my stepdaughter too. So I'm telling you, that by understanding a few things and understanding the lies, you can ask better questions to find more answers. And I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not telling you what to do with your own situation. I'm just telling you that there are more lies here than I've ever seen in our medical cabal. You can't imagine from the 1930s on how the country doctor was ousted and the Johns Hopkins training of pharma, where they only treat symptoms and they don't go to the root cause of anything anymore, right? They don't treat the root cause. Just the symptoms came in lock, stock, and barrel. And it became the norm, and it became science. And I know people beating cancer. This is why, I wrote the ebook on cancer, katetalks.myshopify.com, that talks about what to do, 14 pages of this is what you do. So, not medical advice. It's just that I would take a big, heavy look at this ebook and I would say, yes, this is probably what you should do, because these are the things that are working. So obviously, chemo is killing people at a rate of like 97%, right? And so, yeah, probably not the answer. But doctors can't clue in and go, hey, what we're doing isn't working. That's the frustrating part right there. So katetalks.myshopify.com. It's 10% off right now. Go get it. It's under $10. It's like $9. Go get it. Oh my gosh, this is your health. Okay. You'll spend a lot more than that on chemo. So before you do that, you might want to check this out, because I'm just there to save people a lot of research, because people launch into research mode and they spend a lot of time trying to come to the conclusions that are already in this book. So katetalks.myshopify.com. I take Cardio Miracle every day, twice a day, because it's that mineral delivery system, right? And we need more minerals, more fruits and vegetables. That's what that is, Cardio Miracle. And I take copper. I take all of these things because we are devoid of these nutrients. They're not in our soils. We have pesticides and toxins and parasites that are killing us, and we're not doing anything about it. We just keep allowing the medical cabal to steer us in a direction of more medical cabal. And that's not okay. How are we going to change that? Come on. We got to change it, right? So the other one I was going to mention, and I'm running out of time, was organ donation. For the love of Pete, stop signing up for it blindly and telling them that they can have whatever organ they want. Each body is worth $1 million to $2 million. This is why they try to get you into organ donation as fast as they possibly can. And they can't take organs from a dead person. They take them from you when you're alive, very much alive, and you can feel. Okay? And they do it without anesthetic. And I have done shows on the origin of organs. And people, this is exactly why you're shown movies after movie after movie after movie, commercial after commercial, giving the glorified honorary, standing there while the donor is wheeled down alive to take the organs. We have people sitting in hospitals that are crying because they're saying, look, I think my loved one can live. And they're getting thrown into the decision of organ removal because their licenses say so. Why do you think it's on the freaking driver's license? Haven't you thought of that? They put it on your driver's license? Why? Does everyone die in a car crash? I'm telling you that it's on your driver's license for a reason. There's money to be made on organ donation. Please stop putting it on your driver's license as an organ donation bin, okay? Because there are so many instances where the body just needs to heal and the person wakes up. The brain just needs to heal and the person wakes up. There are so many instances of this. Please don't rush into it. And there's a reason they come down now and they bully you. The people from organ donation literally bully you into a decision. And they do it fast when you're freaking out and when you're in grief and when you're in this state of crazy. And they do it for a reason, okay? I've done shows on this. All you have to do is Google the Kate Daly Show organ donation. It'll come up. And I just want to tell you what a big fat lie it is, and that there really isn't a thing called brain death. That term was coined in the late 60s, and it was a product of the medical cabal. So it was not a thing. And the person that actually, I'll have to look this up, the person that actually talked about that and brought this to light was just dumbfounded that we were falling for this, that we were basically like not even questioning this. So there's so much to this that I really want to relay to you guys, but I've done shows on it, like I said, where the testimony of this, the things that are done since the 60s in organ donation, you're going to want to question that. Quit putting it on your driver's license, for Pete's sakes. Because it's so There's just a lot of evil behind it as well. And I know that there are people out there that say, I was saved from this. I get it. I get it. And yes, maybe your life was prolonged because of this, but you better be real careful about it too. And extremely careful in the way that you view it, and in what situation you would actually want to do this. So, let me see here. I just wanted to give you this. Sorry. Hold on a second. For some reason. Oh, Dr. Paul Byrne, Byrne. All you have to do is look him up, because he talks about the beginning of this multi-billion-dollar industry, some very evil practices going on. And the HIPAA document that we all sign has 14 hidden clauses in there. And that even if you have not consented to be an organ donor, or even if you had just taken it off your license, the hospital will say you didn't know what you were doing and maybe you still wanted it there, so they can take your organs. So you want to be real careful about this and make sure you're signing a document that says, based on your situation, your loved ones, after you speak to them, get to determine this. The hospital does not, because the hospital now is taking liberties and doing things in this area that they haven't done before. In fact, getting a lot more strenuous about taking the rights away from people and doing the organ harvesting. And so there's a lot of money to be made. By the way, like I said, the term brain death is not a thing. People think that that's like clinical science, and it was just coined. It wasn't a product of anything, actually. But Dr. Paul Byrne actually talks about the truth about organ donation, and you're going to want to check that out. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It was bad. It was really, really bad, and scary, because we just think it's this honorable thing to do. Think about all the movies. Remember Minnie Driver in that movie, and all these different movies about organ donation? They really hype it up. And they show you this all the time. I don't know if you guys get that, but they're showing you commercials. They're showing you shows. They're really, whenever the media is hyping something up, take a second look. Take a second look at it. Just make sure you know enough about it. And give the time that it takes to heal to a brain. You might want to just exercise the option to wait a little bit before you end that life. Just wait a little bit. There are plenty of stories out there that you can get to that talk about the fact that they waited and they were so happy, but they had been bullied by the hospital to end the life quickly. So just saying that we've been lied to a lot. And so today was really about these conspiracies that end up being just lies. They're just lies. They're not conspiracies. They are conspiracies. People do conspire, but you're not crazy to call those out. You're not crazy to notice something and patterns and notice things that are weird, that don't make sense, like the origin of some of these diseases that they actually did not have at the time, except for maybe symptoms of poisoning, but they named them new diseases for a reason. You might want to look into that and go back to the origin of things. We have to be a thinking populace, and we're not a thinking populace. And the snake oil salesmen are the medical cabal trying to sell you on pharma's latest and greatest. And they only go after the symptoms. They don't go after the root cause, right? So we have a definite problem there. So I think a smart person would probably look at that and go, hey, they're not solving anything, right? And one pill becomes 2 pills, and 2 pills becomes 3 pills, because you have to take a pill for all the symptoms that arise from the first pill. And then all of a sudden you're on 10 medications. And I think that was by design, actually. So there you go. A lot of history to a lot of these things, but I did today's show as a wrap up on video so that this would be on video, because a lot of these shows were done when I was syndicated radio and they're audio only. Well, we live in a very video generation now, so we've got to kind of put these messages out there so people can understand maybe some of these origins a little bit better. I just wanted to bring all these things up. I was going to go into the current state of politics in that theater, but I've done that enough this week. I'll sign off today, but I really do appreciate you tuning in, because I know it's difficult to hear these things and it's difficult to tell people about them, because they're going to be very skeptical, because we are hardwired to believe whatever the doctor says. And we always call every doctor a good doctor. Have you guys noticed that most of the time? 98% of the time we're like, oh, they're good. Well, what makes them good? What makes them good? Are they saving people? So I look back at all the journalists and all the people that spun the lies of the government during COVID, and not a single retraction was made. And plenty of lies now came out where everybody knows they were lying. But you're often going to find that no retraction was made. Almost every editor, I know 2 editors that are horrid. There's the editors that run the local rags in your town or city are very, very, very leftist, actually, and believe the government. Anything the government says, they're hook, line, and sinker. Probably wearing their masks while they were editing everyone's articles. So just to let you know that they are the gatekeeper of that information, and they will not post anything that does not come from the CDC and the government, which the CDC is the government. So they won't post anything. They won't allow anyone to write anything that actually questions it. And this is why when the hospitals weren't full, and the lie was that they reduced the amount of beds available, and then they would say that the beds were full. So if you have 100 beds, then they would actually take the number down to say like 30, and then they would say the hospital's full because of the 30 beds, not because of the 100, but because of the 30. So they were altering numbers. They were doing all kinds of things to lie to people. And you guys remember all the dance videos, right? That the doctors and nurses did, because they had so much time on their hands to entertain, right? To look like heroes, that, they were out there doing those music dance videos for us. So you knew they weren't busy, right? You knew people weren't parked up at the hospital, right? And then the people that did go in got the remdesivir, death is near dose of Ebola medicine that had a horrible record, and that Fauci was making money off of, and because he owned the patent, and a ventilator too soon. Now the articles are coming out saying, yeah, the ventilator was given too soon. They were talking people into it. I know somebody that got talked into a ventilator by the hospital and died. Got talked into it. Didn't want it, got talked into it. They were also doing some pretty sneaky stuff too. Like administering remdesivir on the sly, so they didn't think people would notice. I know people that noticed. So we got to take better care of our health and actually learn something from 2020. This is the time to do it. And if you don't get it by now, I don't know that anyone will, by the way. I'm not quite sure anyone would get it by now if you haven't gotten it, that we were lied to severely by the media, your news media, even people on our alt-right, okay, lying to you, pretending that it was scary. We're going to catch the next COVID bug. And then also, of course, just looking at all of this, I'm just amazed. I know there's a place for medicine that we know today, and that would probably be more in trauma. For disease, oh, hell no. No. I would never go to just your straight up medical doctor for disease. No way. Trauma, yeah. Stop the bleeding, save a limb, trauma. Disease? Oh, hell no. Because they don't understand health and they're not trained in health. So, and that's a big problem for all of us. And we're getting told by the medical cabal, these no salt diets. You need iodine, you need salt, you need all these things. I mean, I just can't believe the lies we're being told. But also go back to the world population lie that I talked about earlier. That's a huge one. That's a huge one that actually gave them the eugenics movement over the last 120 years. So everything stems from population. Go back to the speeches and you'll see them cite the overpopulation numbers over and over and over again to drum that lie into your mind. And then you realize that they are lying about the numbers in China and India. So anyway, I leave all that with you for the weekend. Review this again, and I appreciate you. I appreciate that you're interested in hearing something different and hearing some truth instead of the standard agreed upon unity broadcast, if you will, because there's too much of that going on and not enough thought and truth and actual thinking happening right now. So be faithful, be fearless. Go to katedalleyradio.com, support the show. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. And the products that I talk about, go get them. Go get the cancer ebook. Go get the copper. Start taking that. I care about your health. I want you to be healthy because we need you. But honestly, I only tell you to take the things I do because I take them. And I've been given a lot of products over the years to pitch to you guys, but I only tell you about the ones that work. So Cardio Miracle, amazing. cardiomiracle.com/Kate. Try it out. Copper, take that at formulaiq.com. Recuperate Copper. They have two different ones, Copper IQ and Recuperate. Take Recuperate. And so many wonderful things that you can do. All right. I appreciate you guys. And by the way, have a really good weekend. Thanks, you guys.